Hey, everybody. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. And welcome to another live stream. And we'll just give it a minute for everyone to jump in. But thank you so much for joining me today. Today's topic is how deconversion changes us. But again, we'll give it just a minute for everyone to get started. And I appreciate you being here tonight. Hope you're doing well. So happy Thursday. It was a beautiful day here in Atlanta. Hope you all had a good day where you were. It was a wonderful thing to be with my kids a lot today in school. Got to eat lunch with them several times a week. So I was at lunch with them and lots of other good stuff. So it's always good to be with the kids, always good to be in nature, always good to get the sunshine. And it's always good to be with you all. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. And again, tonight is a great topic, in my opinion, how deconversion changes us. I do have so far 4 parts set up. So if you do look in the live part of the Harmonic Atheist YouTube channel, you can see them there. If you've subscribed to the channel, I believe that you can sign up for them to automatically pop up on your phone when I'm going live, in case you need a reminder. But appreciate again you being here. Could you all just give me a quick comment to let me know you can hear me okay? Oh, looks like I already see some people. Can everybody hear me okay? Great to see you, Susanna from Scotland. Rational Horizon 93, thanks for joining us. And Stephen Boland. Am I coming through clearly? Great, thank you so much, Rational Horizon. With live streaming, sometimes you do have to close a whole bunch of windows. I did close a bunch, but I can close some more if I need to. But as long as I'm coming through clearly, that's great. And so again, I've got at this point at least 4 different meetings set up to go through this topic. Again, how deconversion from Christianity changes us. And the reason that I thought about it and thought it was a great topic is really because I think there's a tendency among us in the deconversion community to focus pretty heavily, and sometimes arguably too heavily, on the actual facts of why we deconverted. So if you were to say, how did deconversion change you? You could be tempted, if you're thinking of it in a certain way, you could be tempted to say, well, it changed me in the sense that I learned a lot more and I see mythology differently. I see God's character differently. And I think that's critical. Obviously, that's what helped a lot of us get out, but I mean it in a different sense. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to get also a little bit more poetic, which you all know is near and dear to my heart, for us to bring the poetry out that we all have. But, if you're here on my channel, and if you're here specifically for this topic, you're probably in the group of people that would say that something inside of you sort of broke down when you deconverted. Or maybe it didn't break, but it just outgrew the shape that it had been forced into. Maybe some of you have walked away from Christianity recently, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle, sort of a messy, foggy, disorienting process, or maybe you're just starting to whisper the questions like, I don't know if I'm going to deconvert, but just curious about channels like this, but you're asking questions that you weren't allowed to say before out loud, and you're giving yourself that freedom. So kudos to you for taking the first steps. But wherever you are in that process, you're not alone. And I want to talk tonight and for this series, and I don't know if it'll go past 4 or not. I think 4 is probably a good number to aim for, but it might be more like 5 or 6. But I want to talk about what happens to us on the deepest levels when we walk away from the faith. Not just the beliefs or the rituals, but really we're talking about the entire worldview. We were submerged in it, many of us from childhood. What happens when you get to that point where everything is different, everything changes? When you leave Christianity, it's not like you're just changing your favorite band. Some of us had a favorite band or a favorite musician at some point, and we're like, oh, I'm going to switch, pick a different person. It's not even like you're switching political parties, as much as that could be a big deal. It's not deciding that you're more into yoga than into running or into lifting weights. And again, I try real hard to be looking for the metaphors, because often the metaphors help us to open up sort of the can of worms that we're talking about. But it's sort of like performing open heart surgery, right? On yourself, on your identity, while you're trying to live and keep breathing. You're disassembling your old self and reassembling a new self, or at least you get to that point eventually. But this old self that you're tearing apart was this eternal solid person that doesn't really change. Like, it's just you and God, and you know where you're going, and you know who you are, and it's somewhat set in stone. And all of a sudden it's not, very much not. And it's this whole mixture of emotions that comes out of it, the grief and the rage and the wonder and the oh my goodness and oh my God, and what am I doing? And I'm confident today, I'm not confident tomorrow. And it's all tangled up, sometimes in a single moment, a single breath. This is not just theological, this is not just academic, this is psychological, this is emotional. Just goes to the deepest part of you. It's in some ways relational, it's biological, it's touching on your memories, your nervous system, your sexuality, your sense of purpose. There's got to be a place where we honor all that. That much change in one person in your life, you have to honor it. You have to honor your journey, where you've been, where you are, and where you're going, even though you don't know where that might be. You know, people might throw these cliches at us. Why can't you just move on? You know, you just got hurt by somebody at church, obviously. You didn't get your way. You just wanted to sin, whatever it was. But why can't you just move on? Let it be part of your past. Why do you still have to talk about it? Well, you still feel it. It still hurts. Some people, in their ignorance and rudeness and gaslighting, they just don't realize you weren't just rejecting Christianity as a worldview. You were completely having everything you ever believed about yourself and who you've been and where you're going, the life that is, the life that's to come. All of it gets turned upside down. You're healing from the way that ideas got wired into your soul. You're learning to breathe for the first time without someone else dictating to you how to do it and what that all means. So we're going to walk slowly. And again, some of my presentations, as you know, move pretty quickly. Some of them do not. This one's not really a fast one. So if you're looking for something fast, I've got other ones that move quickly, but this is more of a time to just sit and let it kind of hit like a wave after wave after wave effect. We're going to walk through, how does deconversion change us? Hopefully not just the surface stuff, but also the deep, quiet shifts, the tectonic stuff is just like massive, and it takes a while to even realize it's going on. But there are ways in which we see life so differently now, so very differently. And our ideas about love and morality, meaning, our purpose in life, everything, it's like it softens us and it sharpens us all at the same time. It devastates you and it sort of resurrects you, if I can use that metaphor. It's like we need a place where we can think through it and grieve together, laugh, hopefully a little bit, talk through the things that still haunt us, perhaps, or at least haunted us for a while. And I don't know if you did this in your church, but we used to have candlelight services at Christmas time. There's probably some other times of the year that certain denominations did it, but it kind of feels like we're going to light some candles in the ruins. And we're not necessarily just trying to mourn the end of something that we used to think was sacred, but to celebrate ourselves and to celebrate the beginning of something that's hopefully a lot more honest with the reality of where Christianity came from, but also honest about all kinds of other issues. Everything from the nature of what of Yahweh's character, is he really a good God or not, to is it really okay to think that I can be happy in heaven while other people are being tortured in hell? Let's be honest about this. Let's not just parrot the party line. Let's be honest. We're not trying to be bitter. We're trying to be clear. We're aiming for clarity, but we're naming the truths that Christianity could not hold. And we're honoring the fact that you survived it. So I hope this is a place where, we can take a deep breath, pour yourself a drink, a hard one if you need to, light a candle if you want to, if you're in a safe place to do so. But this is a safe place. And we want to talk about this journey and how it really changes everything. So I'm going to talk about the things that stood out to me as I reflected on what changes in us. They're not necessarily the right order of I didn't try to make them like the most profound first. I just tried to make a sort of a brainstorm of what is it that I feel like changed in me. And I hope some of these resonate with you. I would like to ask for your feedback in the sense that, number one, I'm going to have a chance, throughout some of these different points to read some of the comments, and I'll read what's there so far in a second. But also, if you have any comments about what I say, obviously I want to hear that. But also, if there's other stuff that you want to bring to the table in terms of, how Christianity, how your deconversion changed you, let me know in the comments. And if it's not something that I was otherwise going to cover in the next 4 sessions of this live stream, I'll try to make sure I add it in and cover it. So let me read a few quick comments, then we'll get started. Excuse me. Yep. Stephen says religious trauma syndrome is real. Absolutely. The mourning period isn't over for time lost. 14 years, I believed. Wow. I was longer than that, but 14 years is enough. If you really believe it, it's enough to do damage. Rose-colored glasses are off. Definitely. Rabbit Atheist. Very cool. Great to see you here. For anyone that does not know the Rabbit Atheist, please go check out his YouTube channel. Doing great work. I was able to interview Ed a while ago, so please do check out the Rabbit Atheist YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe. Hear his great comments and great work there. But he says, I found my deconversion to be transformative, both positively and negatively. I still have scars, but I also have had to learn to be a good human being without religion. Yeah, very, very well said. See here, how do I pronounce that? Tony Gillis. I think that's right. Tony Gillis, 2249. I felt tremendous relief after leaving, but the old programming still comes back. Connecting with others going through the same process is extremely helpful. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ed. Appreciate that. Yeah. Hanging in there. Put it that way. Hanging in there. Not much better than hanging in there, but I'm hanging there. Rational Horizon says, I'm less judgmental than when I was a Christian. I'm still a work in progress. Well said. Pardon me, I've got some green tea here. I might be drinking a little bit here to keep my throat from going. I've been talking all day. Steven says, when I left, I spent 3.5 years studying harder than before. I did it from a neutral mind, and boy, did I realize that I knew nothing about the real story. Yeah, well said. My tolerance at present around a Christian is very thin. Yeah, I hear you. There are days they push our buttons, don't they? There are days you just can't take it. The triggering is so intense. Yeah, love Steven. Oh, thank you so much, Brady Ichabod. Brady Goodwin here is in the house. Thank you so much for your super chat. Loving the facial hair, rugged. Yeah, Mountain Man, bringing sexy back. But Brady is also, if anyone doesn't know, Brady is also a tremendously amazing YouTuber. So I'm beyond honored to have both Ed, again, the Rabbit Atheist, and Brady with the Ichabod podcast on the channel here tonight. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate you being here. And thanks for your support. So the first topic I wanted to bring up was, sorry, give me 1 second here. The first topic was that it makes us appreciate life more. And I know that's like, well, that's pretty basic. It's pretty obvious. But, without the promise of heaven or any kind of afterlife or the fear of hell, this one precious life becomes exponentially more important to us, more sacred in a sense. Every moment begins to feel like it's growing brighter when it's no longer this rehearsal for eternity. When I was a Christian, it felt like the real life begins the moment you die. You're not necessarily just rehearsing as if this life means nothing. It really means a lot because there's rewards, there's all kinds of judgment to come. But in the sense of the time span, this is a blink of an eye, and therefore, in a sense, it doesn't really matter as long as you get the magic words right. Jesus is my Lord and Savior. His death and resurrection covers me. If you get the magic words right, and therefore you have a golden ticket to enter the chocolate factory, then eventually it's like it doesn't really matter. The big picture story is up ahead. It's going to start when you die, and death is just a graduation into your true life. That's what so many of us thought. But there's something haunting and beautiful about truly realizing that this life might be it. Like, this is it. This is it. This is all of it. Your breath, your heartbeat, your body, the softness of your dog when you pet it, the morning light on your kitchen floor, the way your friend laughs when they laugh so hard they snort. Like, all these things, our kids' eyes looking at us in laughter or tears, like, this life, this is it. And for many of us, who are on the older side, like, it's like, wow, it's not even like that it's it. It's like there's not necessarily a ton left. I'm 49 this year. This isn't a dress rehearsal for something better. This isn't the prologue to the main event. This is the show. This is the whole thing. And there's a sobriety to that realization that I think at first feels very terrifying. Like you're stepping off the edge of a cliff and you're realizing there's no one that's going to catch you. There's no heaven to hold you. There's no hell to fear, thankfully, but there's no heaven to hold you. It's just like gravity and you and the wind in your face. And it's not just deconversion from a belief. It's, how do I put it? Deconversion from a delusion, really. You're told not to fall in love too much with this world. This world is passing. Don't fall in love with the now. Don't fall in love with physical bodies. Fall in love if you're going to fall in love with something and be enraptured by the kingdom to come, heaven, your angelic body someday. The real joy is later. Real joy is coming soon. The real beauty is later. The real meaning is always somewhere else. It's a future event. And when that illusion cracks, I mean, really cracks, and you start to live without this future tense fantasy of eternity, some other things happen and you start to notice things differently. Things you never noticed when you thought you were immortal. How your kid's laughter feels like a full body miracle, or how maybe making bread. I love to make bread. How making bread at home, this feels like safety. Or how even things that are sad, your sadness means you loved someone deeply enough to feel the ache of their absence. And when we were Christians, we were always told, store up your treasures in heaven. Don't get too attached to the world. It'll all burn anyway, right? Your body isn't your home. Your real life begins when you die. And so we kind of numbed ourselves to the present. We diluted our joy with this guilt over, like, I'm not supposed to really like anything too much, especially not the true pleasures and the eroticism of life, but I'm even not supposed to really just get attached to any of it. We praised detachment. That was a virtue, right? We were taught basically to die while we were still living, to die before we died. And once you leave that narrative, I mean, really leave that narrative, like it's just completely over. It's gone. Some really interesting things change. Once that myth dissolves, you begin to realize the fragility as well as the majesty of being alive. Your breath feels more like a miracle. It's like you don't believe in miracles, but your breath, the fact that you exist, feels like a bit of a miracle. And we were so enraptured with the promised land and the other side of the banks of Jordan, those songs. You realize it's kind of right here. Like if there's any banks of Jordan to get to, you're in it. I remember, that guy that plays Andy on The Office. I forget if it was in the actual office or maybe it was a commentary after it was over, but somebody said something. I think it was him who said something like, you don't realize that you can't wait for the good old days and to start, and then you realize later like that you were already in them, and you wish someone could tell you you're in the good old days when you're in them. You're in the good old days now, whether your life sucks or not. And right now, mine is hard. Mine is really difficult. And some of you, I'm sure, could echo that and worse and say, yeah, life's difficult. But like the good old days are now. And that's both a blessing and a curse. That's hard to swallow if life's not going so well. But it's also like, this is reality. And again, they're just layer upon layer of trying to process what that means to us. But we don't treat time anymore like a waiting room. We're not sacrificing sunsets for sermon notes. Like, I got to see the sunrise and sunset while I can. We stop wasting our days praying for revival. We say, I need to see the beautiful golden hour sunlight outside my window. Time becomes sacred in a sense, not because it leads to eternity, but specifically because it doesn't. And all kinds of other things wrapped up in that become sacred. The chance, the time to love, the time to be connected to people. You're not going to get rewarded with things in heaven. This is all we've got. And even death, in a sense, can somewhat feel sacred. Again, not because it's ushering us into the glories of heaven, but because it's like showing us we have to live while you can. You have to shine your candle while you can. And at some point, all of our lights will go out. And I don't mean that to be depressing, but just to say, reflect on that. And to borrow the biblical phrase, redeem the time while you can. Redeem the time because the days are evil. They're not, but redeem the time while you can. Deconversion strips away that illusion of eternity. And what it leaves behind is this world, this present, this time, right now, you and me, this moment, this breath. And for some people, when that really hits, I think you could argue that's the first time you really live, the first time you've really been here and present, awake and alive and aware and just fully sensing things like, this is it. And I don't need to be depressed about it. I just need to acknowledge it. I need to appreciate life more because it's real. It's not going to get perfect. Not now, not in some future heaven. Here's where I am. And I encourage you to just let that sink in. Some of you would take that different directions. I'm not saying every topic I'm going to bring up here, I'm going to be able to reflect on it the right way for myself or for you, but let it sink in, appreciate life more. And I think that's something that I'm still trying to grasp what that means. For me, some of the most important things, just to wrap this part up, is I love looking at the stars at night. I would love at some point to get one of those really expensive telescopes, but even without it, I'd love to go out to some place where there's not much light interference, where you can just look up and see the stars, millions of them just twinkling at you in the middle of nowhere. That would take my breath away. I'd love that. And I think those are the kind of things that we need to grasp. And it puts so much in perspective. We are so small and our time here is so brief, and yet it feels important to us. Whether or not it really is up for debate, of course. But it feels important, and it feels like what you do matters in so many ways. And in many ways, even though it doesn't matter for eternity, it matters even more because no one is ever going to judge you later. Like you have to shine and, in a sense, shout your kindness and shout your love for people more than ever, because it's not like it's going to carry on somehow. It's just, you do what you can while you can. Sort of taking it a different direction, I thought the next point that I wanted to make, let me read a few comments here. Let's see here. Rational Horizon says, I finally found myself to accept the LGBT community as well. I have love and compassion for them, saddened about what I felt and said about them while I was a Christian. Yeah, I think a lot of us would do that. Awesome, though, that you've come to that conclusion. Caterpillar, great to see you in the house. Thank you so much. I am a far more suspicious human now, which has its pros and cons, but feels worse. Yeah, that's a great point. Very great point. Yeah, I think I've touched on something like that later on. But yeah, very good point. We definitely become more suspicious. Our spidey senses go up. All gods are man-made and religion is fake. Yeah, I think those definitely go together. Yeah, Brady, Ed, and everyone, good to see you all. Absolutely. I still struggle with that. It'll take time. This life is it. The past is gone. Tomorrow never comes. We only have the now. That's why it's called the present. Yeah. It's such a horrible realization looking back what we truly believed. Yeah, and I think I didn't really touch on this, but just the fact that they really stole time from us. That's what they did. They stole time from us. Don't stress about the past. It causes depression. Yeah, for sure. Yes, true. And I had Brady at the office. So I'm going to sort of shift gears here to a very different topic, but I think it's one that popped up for my mind right away. And we're sort of, it touches on the comment that was brought up here in a slightly different way, but the word suspicious, I'm going to carry that one, copy that from Caterpillar. It makes us more suspicious of these systems of control and deception. And we begin to see, I think, how manipulation isn't going to reveal itself as manipulation. It's going to wear a smile and a happy face and, shiny, happy people kind of stuff. It's going to quote scripture, and deconversion is going to sharpen our BS detector. It's going to put up your spidey senses. It's going to make it eventually nearly impossible to ignore a situation where someone is saying they care about you, but you can just sense and smell that this sounds like coercion. This sounds like you're masquerading as something that you're pretending to be something else. It's like, that doesn't make sense anymore. And I see it and I see through it, and I'm tired of it. And it's disgusting me. I'm no longer going to put up with the facade. And I think that's extremely obvious with politics these days. I mean, it's like ridiculous, but Christianity sort of gets a get out of jail free card with that, carte blanche to be ultra deceptive. But once you've clawed your way out of the system that had you convinced that if you want to be in a right relationship with God for eternity, that it's going to require your assent, it's going to require your belief and your obedience. And when they tell you, well, God's justice is deserved for people and eternal torture is what they get if they don't, if they still have a sin issue when they die, You got so convinced of that now that you see what that is, you'll never look at that system the same way ever again. And I said it a little differently in a different interview or a different presentation before, but you realize something was done to you. I think it's important to say it that way or something like it. Something was done to you. You weren't just like going to church. They were doing things to you, and it was very well thought out, very well orchestrated. They had the goal in mind. They knew how to make it look, these aren't the droids you're looking for, kind of stuff. We know how to make this look like something else. We know how to make torture and genocide look like something that's pretty basic to God's goodness and his nature. They just keep on trying to schmooze you into something that your basic humanity is crying out and saying, there's just no way this is right. And eventually it's like your internal firewall just gets upgraded. When you deconvert, it gets upgraded overnight. Suddenly your ears perk up when someone starts talking in absolutes. And, even if you just hear a phrase like just trust the process or submit to authority, God said it, that settles it. You notice the patterns, and not just in religion, again, but in government, even in corporations, certainly in politics in general, and relationships. You begin to see how power deceives and lies and protects itself, and how language can be weaponized, how institutions will sort of give you this sense of certainty as long as you can exchange it for submission. Christianity, we know, wasn't just teaching us what to believe, although it certainly did that, but it wasn't just teaching us what to believe. It was teaching how to believe and how to poison the well against everybody else, how to be unquestioning, how to be passive, how to fear, fear dissenting, not parroting the party line again. We were all conditioned to obey, and I would argue to obey without evidence, without reason to do so. And it was rebellious if we doubted. It was sinful. Our questions were not welcome. And for a lot of us, they're like, if you go down this route, you're literally kind of flirting with the devil himself. Like, don't go there. It's not worth it. This is not the way to honor God and his word. But again, once that curtain gets pulled back, once you realize the whole thing was kind of a psychological stage play, this was an emotional magic trick meant to keep you tame, keep you in line. You start recognizing that script like everywhere. This is the Wizard of Oz. This is the man behind the curtain. This is you being unplugged from the Matrix. Like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. You hear it in the voice of maybe a boss who uses the word teamwork. I'm thinking of what's that? Is it Office? What is that movie? Office Space? I forget it. Someone put it in the comments. You know what I'm talking about. But like that weird boss who's like, yeah, I'm gonna need you to come into work this weekend. Like, they're just like using teamwork to guilt you into unpaid overtime or something. And you see it in the politicians all the time, where they're wrapping their authoritarianism in patriotism. That's like this very week we're seeing it en masse. Like, if you don't reject these marches, these No Kings marches, then that makes you un-American, or you're anti-American. Like, you hate us. Like, this is what we see every day in politics with MAGA. And you spot it in the MLM pitches, where if you're like us, we'll do this whole group thing together, and we're the best thing ever. And you see it in an abusive partner quoting verses about submission. You see it in a pastor shaming victims to protect abusers, usually. And once again, when you see it, you're like, I'm no longer seduced by that. I was seduced. I was tricked. I'm no longer seduced by the aesthetics of righteousness. You're not a good person. And I'm no longer, just because you can quote scriptures, or because you're a pastor, you wear the pastoral garb, you are under just as much suspicion as anyone else. You can have the nicest smile, the whitest teeth, the most confident tone, the Bible verses. It doesn't matter. I have seen behind the curtain, and damn it, it's all smoke and mirrors. And I think it's important for me to reflect on the fact that, even though that's how I can say it now, I can say it, describe it that way, you have to go back and say, I'm angry about it, but darn it, it really worked. It worked on me for years. How in the world did I get that deceived? How did it work and I never saw past it? I thought I was kind of smart, clever, clever enough. I was sincere. I was devout. If I couldn't see past the bullshit, does that mean basically this could work on anybody? Even the most vigilant person could get deceived. And I think arguably, yes. And one of the postmortems we have to do is to say humanity as a species is extremely culpable to deception and to self-deception. They can trick us and then we trick ourselves. They police us, then we self-police. And it's imperative at that point to say, if I'm going to keep from falling into stuff, I got to be vigilant. Not necessarily like cynical vigilant, not bitter vigilant, but just, the sense of being clear-eyed. You're no longer clay in the potter's hands. You can keep your own shape. You're not, super hard where you can't, twist and bend with new information, but you're also not so pliable that they can just do whatever the hell they want. So you start asking better questions. Who benefits from this belief? If I believe this and you believe this and we all sat together, who benefits from this? And what is the groupthink dynamic going on here? Who's protected by the silence? Who's being punished for asking questions? Are there any emotional needs that they're exploiting? And you start to build a different kind of discernment. It's not, stemming from your doctrines or some kind of spiritual discernment. The Spirit's leading me. You're thinking through it on the psychological level. You're trying to be into psychology a little bit, not on necessarily a professional level, but you're looking for evidence. You're looking on lived reality. And you're willing to say, I see red flags and I'll no longer ignore them. And you're no longer afraid to be divisive or rebellious. That's not what you're doing, but if they label you that way, so be it. Your suspicion is now your survival skill. It becomes your guiding light. It becomes your bullshit radar. You're not naive anymore, or at least not like you were before. And you realize maybe there's more. I've uncovered so much, but maybe there's more I'm missing. I think that's very true about politics and very true about economics, very true about systems of control in our society. But regardless of where you take it after you deconvert from Christianity, once you've been set on fire in the name of truth, or at least in the name of no more lies, you smell the smoke before the spark ever gets near you. And that's not, in my opinion, paranoia. That's wisdom. You don't want to be the sucker in the room ever again, if you can help it. So that's the second big thing I wanted to share. Let me read a few quick comments here, and then we'll go on to the next section. By the way, in terms of timing, about 30 minutes into it, I am going to probably go for about an hour to an hour and a half, and then it's probably a good time to cut it off before I wear myself too thin. But anyway, Henry says, I have heard it said that doubt is a sin. Yeah, in many contexts, a lot of people have said that. Yeah, some people twist it. Doubt's just God's refining you, but the whole doubting Thomas kind of stuff definitely is true. See here, skipped a few here. Yep, the BS meters go off. Pleasant lies are easily swallowed, and hard truth is rejected. Well said. Yep, all doubts are Satan. Yeah, we're all Antifa. Socialist in the U.S. Yep. Ray the X. HOJ, I spent 65 years in the church and never believed in God. Interesting. Jesus, heaven or hell. I didn't deconvert or deconstruct. I simply and unintentionally bypassed the indoctrination process. Kudos to you. You're a much better person than I in terms of the being able to see it for what it was earlier. I was in it hook, line, and sinker. I mean, in it to win it, hook, line, and sinker. Rich elite, follow the money, yeah. Why 65 years? Yeah, that's a good question. I would just guess some people stay because of the community, but if you feel like sharing, Ray, feel free to let us know, unless you already did in a comment here. Sadly, money is the new God for many. Yep. Let's see here. Jesus serves the mammon these days, yeah. And God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and one man, Jesus Christ. I am guessing that that's a troll, but yeah. Jesus Christ, Lord. Let's see here. Bear with me 1 second. We're going to ban that troll. Thanks for playing. Thanks, but no thanks. I loved playing the music, traveling, and the community. That was all it was for me. Okay. Nice. Yeah, for some people, especially if your church isn't like, jamming hell down your throat, fire and brimstone all the time, it can be a lot easier to stay for a while. But anyway, the next part I wanted to go over was the idea that indoctrination and then subsequently escaping it through deconversion, it makes you intensely reflect on your childhood, and it makes you begin to really see and think about the dynamics of propaganda and indoctrination and brainwashing and all the ways that you got tricked. Because when you start to replay the tapes of your upbringing, you start to recognize the ways that fear and guilt, we talked about thought stopping cliches a few months ago, but how these kind of things are weaponized against your young, malleable, innocent, developing mind, and how that can happen. And you can still think it's a good thing, at the time. And there's this moment, sometimes years into deconstruction, where you start finding yourself thinking about it. Maybe if you're like me, you lay awake at night too much and rehash things that you wish you could just turn it off and just go to sleep. But you kind of stare at the ceiling and the memories start playing. Not necessarily always memories that are horrific or of abuse or overt trauma, but just things that you once thought were normal. It's everything from it's normal to circumcise babies, for God's honor. It's normal to do the Lord's table. It's normal to memorize verses. It's normal to tell kids about hell. It's normal to tell people that God is loving, but he's also angry. It's normal to tell kids in Sunday school, even 4, 5, 6-year-olds, that hell is this place of fire and weeping and gnashing of teeth, and that everyone in this room and everyone in the whole world who doesn't invite Jesus into your hearts and make him your Lord and Savior, that's where you're going to go, sweetie. You really don't want to burn, do you? And at the time, it was just so normal. Everyone's nodding. Yeah, of course. Sign me up. I want to go to heaven. I don't want to go to hell. Everyone nodded. And, the VBS songs, Vacation Bible School songs. I've got the joy, joy, joy down in my heart. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. Over and over and into, high school age, you start to learn the bigger songs, the momentous songs, the hymns. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. A mighty fortress is our God. And all that stuff. And you realize from the earliest days, it was drilled into you. You were nothing without God. You were worse than nothing. You were in bad shape without God. And I remember going back to childhood for a second, things like these felt board Noah's Ark stories, where they'd tell the story basically of genocide, really. And it was painted as a victory. Like, this is a victory. God did it. He saved humanity through Noah. Genocide of the whole evil world. Praise the Lord. God's the one that shut that boat door. And then, you as you keep going, you get older, you kind of graduate from the felt board and the little kid stories, and you get to the altar call level, where they're preying on your PREY, preying on your fear of being left behind in the rapture, or again going to hell. And that prayer of salvation, just, you got to be safe. You have got to be safe. There's so much at stake. And it's just over and over and over and over from the earliest days, over and over and over. And at the time, it felt so not just normal, but sacred. And now you look at it and you say, oh my goodness, that was simply nothing more than brainwashing and programming. And you say, what else was planted in my head under the guise of truth? Like what, wait a second. If I ask questions, I'm rebellious. Does that make sense? If I obey God, then I truly love him. But if I don't obey him, then I'm proving I don't love him. And if I need to have faith, I'm supposed to just ignore the fact that this doesn't make sense, or not even go there, just ignore everything. Just say it, say the words as fast as you can. And then you think about all the ways that they put the positive things in your head. God works in mysterious ways. Lean not on your own understanding. They're putting all these cliches again in your head. And the gaslighting, oh, that's just Satan trying to deceive you. And all these fear factors, these appeals to fear. God's going to get you. The devil's going to get you. They're conditioning our behavior. This was both in the family as well as the church and society. This is social control. That's all this has ever been about, is social control. They're rewarding your conformity, and they're punishing effectively your deviance or your curiosity. And you begin to realize that this all happened to you. Again, it was something done to you before you had even the beginnings, like even the very, very beginnings of the psychological tools to detect it and to defend yourself. Again, they weren't teaching you just what to think, they're teaching you how to think, and they're basically, if I can put it this way, they're wrecking you. There's parts of your humanity that naturally question, that naturally look at the other side of things, that naturally look for all kinds of information, and they wrecked you by saying you don't need any of it. Just take what we tell you, and don't. Everything else is bad. That's the devil's information. Those wicked evolutionists, those other people, those other religions. Don't look anywhere except right here. Put the blinders on, and this will keep you safe. Everything else is of the devil. And they did it so early for most of us that without you realizing it, what's happening is your thoughts were not your own. Your thoughts were dictated to you. You were just repeating you're just regurgitating what was given to you, what was shoved into your head. And when you look closely, you see it, like you see the fingerprints of how, as if they were metaphorically like actually pushing into your brain. You see the fingerprints, like, what the hell are your fingerprints doing on my brain? Or like as if your brain was a wall and you see their graffiti that's just all over the walls of your mind. You're clay, and they were sculpting you, not in a good sense, by fear. And so this is in many ways, I think, arguably, not to sound like Yoda, but this is a process of unlearning. This is a process of unlearning what they did, and also observing what they did so you can figure out how to unlearn better. Because I think arguably you can't unlearn everything unless you figure out how they did it. And I'm going to be honest, at times it's humiliating to admit that some of your adult fears might be echoes of your childhood indoctrination. Maybe your phobia about, who knows, about sexuality, about the dark, about, maybe some of you know hell is made up, but you still kind of fear it. And when they whisper, oh, we have a date, we know when God's coming back, you laugh and think that's ridiculous. But there's a part of your brain that says, well, maybe, just maybe the rapture could still be true. You get to a point where you're humiliated to admit that there were entire chapters of your life and your personality that were built to please a God who was never there. And you were manipulated not by the bad guys. You weren't manipulated by the enemies of your soul. You were manipulated by the people who claimed to love you. And it can honestly be rage-inducing. It's certainly at least heartbreaking. It's the start of liberation, but it hurts so much. But I think once you get to a point where you can start to name these things and describe them, and whether it's, metaphorically or using psychological words, you get the verbiage enough to say, I know what you did to me. I know what you did to me, and you can't hide it anymore. And once you have the power to at least name it a little bit, you have a chance at dismantling it. You don't have to confuse, fear with morality. You can stop this whole indoctrination is you, it's your identity. You can pull them apart and say, no, my indoctrination is not my identity. And for sure, you can ask a lot better questions, and you can just say, I'm not going to give my life to a worldview without enough information to know where the hell this thing came from and who's changed it since it started. And in that process, as you ask that question and get your voice back, you're at least starting. And I do want to emphasize, you're starting. You're not getting there. And I've been out of this for 6 years or more. Yeah, 6 years and 1 month. But you're just starting. But you're reclaiming yourself, and in a sense, you're reclaiming your childhood, not in like some kind of religious relic sense, but like your human story is worth telling with honesty. You're going to grieve the innocence that was harvested from you. You're grieving the innocence that was harvested from you that should have been yours to preserve. Your mind should have had autonomy. Your body should have had autonomy. You should not have had the shit beaten out of you to teach you to obey God. And it helps us a lot as we see our own children, because we're going to raise them differently if you have them. But you start saying things, at least in your head, like, it's okay to be confused. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to not agree with me on everything. You're allowed to question things. Even me, you can question me as a parent. You don't need to earn love. You already are loved, and there's no conditional sense about it. And in that process, again, I could talk about this one for a long time too, but I want to keep moving through a few each time we meet. But you're becoming a cycle breaker. I remember when I was growing up, there was endless talk about breaking cycles. I don't know if you had it in your church and your families, but in my family, we had several generations back, maybe 2 or 3 generations back, some mean drunks. Guys that would go out, they would spend all their money that they really should have spent on just basic groceries. And we're talking like, literally, my great-great-grandfather kind of level. So people I never met, but mean drunks who would go out and get drunk and come back and give their wives a black eye. And so by the time my generation came along, and the generation 1 or 2 before me, it was like, we are a teetotaling family. We will not drink alcohol. You will break this cycle. We will never have alcoholism in our family again. And as far as I know, it worked. Almost nobody would touch it. It was just like, no, it's like, why even try? It's so dangerous. It obviously messed with our family generations ago. Like, just don't go there. And most people didn't. I never really touched it. But in the Christian world, there were these questions of like breaking the cycle that was almost like it was implied that the devil is part of the cycle, like the cycle of divorce, or the cycle of adultery, whatever, the cycle of anything really that's a big sin in the church. Like, break this cycle, break the oppression. And it's amazing when you step out of this that you realize that one of the biggest cycles here is simply Christianity 101. You have to break it. It's mythology, and it's a system of control. And you're freeing yourself, as well as trying to make sure the next generation is not handed the same cage with a different looking lock. But you want so much to stay out of those cages and to help other people. And at a certain point, if you want to break all this, like the worst cycles that we're going through, especially in this generation politically, Christianity is one of the worst culprits. Christianity is a version of it for sure, but Christianity is behind some of the worst things happening, even this very day, this very week, this very month. You can blame it right on Christianity 101. You look at the things that they're doing, and it comes right out of this playbook that is heavily, heavily stemming from Christian nationalism. Our nation is in peril, and in many ways, it's directly because of Christianity. We will not heal ourselves personally, as a family, as communities, as a nation, as a world, and if religion does not stop. The longer that this mythology has control over our highest decision makers in the land, bad things will continue to happen. And it breaks my heart. Before I go on to the next point, I want to just read a few quick comments. Let's see here, I got to go back a little bit. And I'm sorry about trolls if I missed any. Yep, church does serve as a social club. My wife is very Catholic. I do enjoy coffee and donuts. Can I get an amen? I love coffee. We have a donut shop here. I live just north of Atlanta, but a few minutes north of me, north of where I live, which is a town called Alpharetta, there is a shop called Dutch Monkey Donuts. And I got to say, if you're ever visiting Atlanta or near it, visit Dutch Monkey Donuts. The donuts you've always imagined. Imagine taking a donut that's like a hoagie roll or a sub roll. It's open, but it's the donut flavor. You put fresh cream down and a bunch of chopped up peaches, or a donut that's wrapped in bacon. It's just endless stuff. Mine is favorite. It's coffee buttercream. It's like a Boston cream, but coffee flavored cream inside. It's just good stuff. So coffee and donuts will get me every time. The Rabid Atheist is a former pastor. There is something I miss about that job, but it is more emotional and usually about when I actually helped people. The rest of it is sadness. Yeah, I hear you. Yep. Church does serve a function. Yeah. And for some people, it's just, there's no reason that everyone has to leave on the same time frame. If people aren't ready to leave, definitely don't leave till it's time. But just at least, if you're going to stay, see through the propaganda and manipulation while you're there. And there are also churches that are very liberal. We've talked a few times about Unitarian churches, and there's some very liberal Episcopalian and Presbyterian churches out there, or Anglican churches. There's churches that aren't going to be as toxic, but yep, praising the poor. Glad to see reality. Absolutely. Fred says, if you're lucky to realize how weak God actually is. Yeah, it's amazing when you realize just how much he's anthropomorphized, and he really just looks like a cranky toddler with a bunch of power, really. Let's see here. As weak as something that does not exist. Yeah, for sure. But boy, did my childhood get reflected on Big Stow. Yeah, might as well. See here. Like my illnesses are due to sin, they say. Yeah, that's a big one. You've seen a library, does have a lot of books. No, this is a green screen. Sorry if anyone's asking that same question. This, I didn't know what it was at first. There is a photo site you can go to where you can get photos for free. There's also a paid part of it called unsplash.com. And this is from that, so it's free to use. I didn't know where it was at first. This is a bookstore up in Calgary. So not mine. I wish I had one like this, but it's a nice background. Honestly got myself into actually thinking my end was going to be not taking the mark of the beast and getting my head taken off. Yeah. A lot of people, the end times eschatology stuff, it gets you. It really gets you, and you can't help but be thinking like that's really the only thing you think about is when is God coming back? I was a minister for 44 years, but I never preached about heaven or hell. I only preached sermons about love, peace, compassion, etc. Things we all naturally have without a God or Savior. That's awesome, Ray. That's awesome. It's funny, and I don't say this in a happy sense, just being honest. When I was a Christian, I would have said you weren't a Christian for being that kind of preacher. That was the judgmentalism level I had. But I'm so glad that you did not listen to people like me at that time, and that you did have a gentler tone about you the way you did it. So that's really good. It's good, Tim, realizing that it was done to us, not just to our stupidity for not having seen it. Yeah, that's true. And you have to admit, this was we were deceived, and we were self-deceived. But a lot of this was done so early that you didn't have a chance. You really didn't, unless you had just a really inherently rebellious personality. A lot of us had no chance to escape this. We really didn't. I bounced back and forth for quite some time on all that. Yeah, it's all a big psyop. Yeah, some days it feels like it, doesn't it? I never heard the Catholics preach hate or against science. They're very educated, and I wonder how much of their theology they really believe these days. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think some of them are so liberal in that sense that it's almost more of a social club, and good for them if they're not doing harm with it. But again, from my vantage point, all it takes is one generation to get back to ultra fundamentalism. Just one generation says we're not taking this literally, and we should. And God, just everything he says, the 10 Commandments, everything, it needs to be front and center. And if you're a fundamentalist, you're one step away from genocide. And I think we just saw that and we're still seeing it, unfortunately, in Gaza as we speak. Fundamentalism and genocide go hand in hand. Yeah, it's worked for centuries, millennia. Indoctrination is deliberately focused on love and fear. It becomes the foundation of accepting a toxic relationship. Toxic relationships are viewed as loving, and it all goes downhill from there. Yeah, and that's a great point, Ed. And I think it's amazing to me, and I think this affects the way even we choose partners and choose the way we do relationships, is that when you're trained your whole life to think of like the epitome of love is an abusive psycho character, like that's as good as it gets. It's not just that he demonstrates it, it's that he actually is the very definition of love. You're screwed. I mean, if your best love picture commits genocide and says, blessed are those who smash the enemy's babies' heads against the rocks, that's your definition of love. Drown everybody in a flood. If that's your definition of love, the chance to have a really healthy relationship in this life is so messed up. There was a hereditary link to alcoholism. Yeah, I think that may have been part of my family's concern, but it's funny. Do you ever watch The Big Bang Theory? I love how what is it? The main character, Sheldon, he says at one point he's drinking alcohol. He's like, "Ooh, wine, grape juice that burns." I'm kind of that way. I can take a really fruity Chardonnay or something, but I'm not into the really strong stuff. I definitely couldn't do like vodka or gin, unless it was like maybe if someone said this is for clearing out your system if you're really sick or something. But I definitely don't get into it. But I'm kind of glad I don't have to worry about it. But I do feel bad for people for whom it is a hereditary issue, especially if there's a susceptibility to really get addicted to it. But yeah, but definitely most of my family stayed away from it for a while. Ray says, I think there's a lot of people in every religious organization that were never indoctrinated. It's hard to know what anyone believes unless they're willing to talk about it. Yeah. And that's really also an interesting point, is to ask the question, not just of indoctrination, but how do we know when someone says, I believe in Jesus as my Lord and Savior? Do we really know what they mean? Because you can unpack that. And even like just in your own head. Like I remember as I got into Calvinism, I would have said earlier in life, I understand the gospel. I understand what it means that Christ's death and resurrection, that his shed blood covers my sins. And I could have explained it for an hour or two probably. But when I got into Calvinism, I would have said to my younger self, you had not even scratched the surface of the depths of the glories of the gospel until you've really understood Calvinism. So it's like even my own very basic, well-informed evangelical profession of faith, it didn't mean much in the long run as it evolved. So even your own head, it can evolve and you can mean different things with it. And the whole congregation, the whole denomination, the whole country, whole world, everyone's perhaps meaning something different by it. I remember the first time I had this friend here in the U.S. and I asked, he goes to church. He goes to a, pretty good church, a good enough church for sure that preaches the gospel on some level, as far as I know. And I asked him once, are you a Christian? And because at the time I was a Christian, he said, oh yeah, no, I'm a Christian. I follow Christ. Like, okay, so to be a Christian to you means to follow Christ. Well, that's already, as an evangelical, that's ringing alarm bells. Like it's not technically what it means. That's what happens after you become a Christian, is you follow Christ. But what does it mean to start becoming a Christian? And I remember digging in with like, what exactly do you mean? And at one point I just was like, I keep hearing the red flags and alarm bells. Like, let me just ask you straight up. Do you believe Jesus is the Son of God? He's like, oh no, of course not. I was like, so you're not really a Christian? He's like, no, I am. I follow Christ. And it's just, again, we all mean different things by it. We all mean different things by it. Anyway, I digress. That's why we have the Clergy Project. Yeah, that definitely helps people. I think Ed's been involved with that as well. The Clergy Project was and remains helpful to me. Yeah. Hey, Derek, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Harry says it would be cool to get around some atheists once a week. Yeah, I wish we had people in our lives just right down the street where we could get together. That'd be amazing. The coffee in my wife's church is mostly good for Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah. Thank you so much. And my family doesn't trust my judgment because apparently it's without God's wisdom. Yeah, for a lot of us, the Bible just straight up says, these things are spiritually discerned. And if you don't have the Spirit, you're not going to get it. It's like you're by default exceptionally deceived. Fundies are wacko. Yeah, it's sad because you can't really talk to them. They're sure that 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 they're right, and it stops right there. Great to see you, Ed. Thanks again for joining. Thank you so much for being here. It's probably gone by now, but let's see here. Hey, Derek, great to see you. Yep. And so at this point, I'm going to do probably one more section here, and then we'll wrap it up. But the last section I wanted to talk about for today, and again, this is going to be a longer, series, so we'll touch on some more of these. But I think we could argue that for a lot of us, when we deconvert, it makes us more aware of the psychology that is involved and required to heal from the trauma. Deconversion is sort of like unlocking the door to understanding concepts like religious trauma, but adding on like disassociation, hypervigilance, inner child healing. Therapy stops becoming taboo, which it was for a lot of us, especially secular therapy. And, therapy becomes a sanctuary. And these words might have sounded before like that's for someone that's been through some horrible assault. That's for somebody that's been through something so traumatic, you just don't even want to think about it. It's so nasty, so horrible. And you hear the words that they're using and the phrases and the descriptions, and you're like, not in a physical sense necessarily, but in a psychological sense, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. That's and you just start to think that's interesting. There's just some interesting parallels, and they're giving you the words to describe what was psychologically done to you. Because before deconversion, a lot of us did not have the vocabulary for what was happening to us. I mean, the vocabulary that we heard was words like backsliding, or you're under a spiritual attack, or falling away, or apostate, or self-deceived, or, just making foolish decisions, whatever. We did not know that what we were experiencing was abso-fucking-lutely trauma. Not trauma like, a car crash trauma, or again, like a physical assault. It wasn't always physical abuse for sure, although it was for a lot of us. But there's at least for sure an invisible trauma that is so powerful still. And it's like it coated your nervous system and your thought life, like pouring oil over something. It's just all over. It's everywhere. It's like this film that's quiet, but it's there, and it's not. You're messy, and you don't even know it. It's all over. You're taught that your heart is deceitful and wicked. Again, it's like it's corroding you. You're taught that your thoughts aren't yours; they belong to God, or else they're sin. You're again taught this trauma of love God or I'll torture you forever. But that's God being loving, and the trauma even of not just what you were taught, but what you weren't allowed to think. You weren't really allowed to say, in the truest sense, I'm scared or I'm angry. Because the wrath of man does not bring about the righteousness of God, or to say I disagree, because you knew you would get rebuked. You'd be put in line for doing that. And you see the bruises start to come to the surface, don't you, when you deconvert? You recognize, you start to embody yourself, and you're like, my chest feels tight when someone brings up the topic of God. Just brings it up, or church. That's you being hyper vigilant. When you were about to sing a church song and you've sort of had this blank stare and this numb feeling as the church songs were going on, you weren't sinning, you were disassociating. Or maybe as they start talking about, rules and punishment and boundaries in church, and you have this wave of guilt, that was not God convicting you. That wave of guilt was like a fawning response. It was a conditioning. And, that deep-seated fear that so many of us had, you're doing something wrong, little Johnny, little Susie, you're a bad kid just because you exist. Those deep-seated fears. I want so much to be right. I want to get the gold star, but I at least I don't want to get the spanking. I don't want to get yelled at. I want to be a good kid. I want to be in the good club. I want to be in God's family. That's spiritual shame trauma. And this is where the floodgates just open. And you start finding these words again that you never found in church, like inner child, like gaslighting, like emotional repression, religious trauma syndrome, post-traumatic stress disorder, childhood memories, all this stuff. And it hits you. Oh my God, I wasn't crazy. I was conditioned. I was terrified. I was surviving. And that's when the healing at least has a chance to start, hopefully. And for many of us, those places were places that we were warned about and told that is dangerous. That is of the devil. Especially like, again, secular therapy. Don't go there. They're going to bring up, Freud and Jung and all these other guys for sure. But they're going to be bringing up concepts of healing that are not talking about God. And you can't have healing without God. So they're anti-God effectively. And you were warned. I was warned. Psychology is worldly wisdom. The therapists are just going to lead you astray. Everything you need is in the Bible. Just read it harder. Thinking of Michael Scott there in The Office, what do you mean you're going to date her harder? You know exactly what that means. Everything we need was in the Bible. Just read it harder. God's Spirit is just waiting to speak to you. If you just soften your heart and your mind, let him do it. He will fix all your wounds, all your aches. He will give you the peace that passes all understanding. But therapy comes in, and it doesn't try to say that never happened. It doesn't try to convert you to anything. It just says, at least at first, let's just sit with this pain and listen. Listen to yourself. And if you don't hear anything, just sit in the silence until your voice slowly starts to whisper. It's there. You just can't hear it now. And for the first time, someone else at first in the therapy room is listening to us, and eventually you're listening to yourself. And we talk a lot on this channel about how Christianity makes it so that you are not safe in your body and you're not safe in your mind. And in that, you're shutting yourself down. You, in many ways, haven't lived a day in your life, but in many ways, you haven't even listened to yourself. The real you is like a child in the corner crying quietly. And if you say, "Oh, come on out, Johnny, come on out, talk to us," that kid is not going to come out and talk. He's scared to death. You got to give this time and listen to yourself unfold and reclaiming yourself and to say to yourself the bare bones basics of deconversion. Your feelings are not sin. Your body is not cursed. You're not being rebellious. Your trauma is not a weakness, and it is not nothing. It is real. It is something, and it's something that's pivotal to the next phase of your journey. What happened to you and to me wasn't love. It was control. It was fear-based obedience that was, pretending to be something good and holy and righteous. And you start doing the work slowly, bravely, painfully, with journaling, maybe crying. Some of you probably screamed into your pillow. You cried in the shower. You reparented your inner child a little bit. You soothed yourself, and you learn to be safe in your body again. And maybe some of you did breath work. Who knows where you took it, but you're starting to make your life beautiful the moment that you let yourself listen to your earlier self for the first time. Let that younger you speak. And now when we hear someone say to you, like another person that's deconstructing, "I don't know if I believe anymore." You and I know that we have the beauty, the amazing beauty and privilege and honor to say, you don't need to be fixed. This is a safe place. We're not going to try to fix you. You don't believe anymore? That's fine. And we can sit together, sit beside each other and say, I've been there. I'm still there. I'm not crazy. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. And this healing is not going to erase our past, obviously, but we're going to try, in a sense, to re-anchor it in truth and healing. And that's a beautiful part of the journey. But these ways that deconversion changes us, it's hard to even find the words. I feel like I'm just stumbling over myself here, but you try to find the words, and the more that you do, the more that you realize what's been done to you, and you find at least a little bit of the words. Get a little poetic or a little bit psychological, whatever direction you want to take it, but you find the words, and you slowly find yourself being empowered like never before. And you find yourself, honestly, like, if I can put it this way, you get in preacher mode. And I know that that's probably a triggering phrase for some of you, but when I encourage people to tell their stories, and I'm just going to digress for 1 second here. When I talk to people who are thinking about telling their stories, one of the things that I tell them is I'll say, I want you to prepare your interview by doing the following. I want you to write down first what actually happened. Write down your timeline. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Write that down. And then I want you to go back, and I want you to do another layer where you say, at this time of what was happening on the outside that a camera could have seen, this is what was being shoved into my worldview by the church and my parents and everything, by Christian radio or Christian TV, whatever. This is what I was learning and being taught. And write that down along, like as if it's the same timeline, but where were you along this journey? Here I was a Baptist. Here I was a Calvinist. Here I was focused on purity culture, blah, blah, blah. Just write it all out. And then go back to that same timeline now and add a third layer. and say, what were you thinking on the inside that no one knew about? What was going on in the inner circle? So you have three parts of it: your timeline, what you were told during those parts, the part of the timeline, and what you were actually thinking that no one knew about. I said there's going to be pivot points in those as you merge them together. And there's going to be a point at which you say to yourself, this is part of where I encourage people to be storytellers. So you need to get to a certain point where you tell us what was happening on the outside and transition to the inside. So for example, you might say it like this: Tim, I was having a great time with the Lord. I loved my church. I loved my pastor. I met with an elder for mentoring and counseling. I was reading my Bible. I was reading chapters and chapters a day. I had to, our daily bread with me, or some other devotional book. I was listening to Christian music, and boy, it captured my heart. I was praising the Lord. I could feel the Spirit movement through these worship songs. And Tim, I had never felt closer to God in my entire life than right then. And this is where you tell them, as a storyteller advisor, you say, but, say the word but, and then hold it. Hold the silence. I felt so close to God in my church, but. And that's where you and I, as the listeners, are like, what? You were so happy at the beginning of the sentence. What just transitioned? Why are you holding my attention? Why won't you say it? You're being silent. They're doing it on purpose. I tell them to do it because I want them to get you to think, I need to know where this sentence ends. And that's where you get into preacher mode, and you get a little either worked up, or you get a little bit emotional, to let the real you come out, and you say, I loved God. I loved my church. I was doing so good, but I realized I was part of something that was so deceptive. I saw it. While I loved it, I was like, I can see the deception. Or you might say, I'm part of something patriarchal. I realized that patriarchy is everywhere, and it feels rotten to the core. And you get to the point where the part of you, that voice, where the things that the seeds of deconversion that you saw it at the time and you didn't have words for it, you finally let it out and you say, I am getting in preacher mode. I'm getting in storyteller mode. And I will tell you, I loved my Lord Jesus Christ, and I loved the Bible. I loved the Word of God. I loved my salvation, but it reeked of control, and I knew it, and I wouldn't admit it. It controlled me. It controlled what I thought. It controlled what I did. It controlled how I felt. It controlled my guilt. It controlled my timeline, my decisions. And I loved it and I hated it at the same time. And I loved myself and hated myself at the same time. And this religion is a goddamn monster. And it stole my life, and I'm fucking done with it. And you get to that point where you're able to say, I am going to let that inner child speak, and I'm also going to let the teenage years and a young adult, I'm going to let it come out. And when you do, when the real you comes out, your voice, you realize you've never heard your voice before. You've never been in preacher mode before. You've never been a storyteller. You've never heard your own story before. And it's time for you to tell your story, not necessarily on my channel. Just tell it to yourself. Tell your story. Let the world know, and at least let yourself know, hey, younger Tim, younger child me, I'm listening. Let's talk about this. You were abused. Whether you were physically touched or not, you were abused. You were psychologically damaged on profound levels that you're just beginning to uncover. And if we're going to get anywhere in this life, I have got to get my voice back. I've got to get my power back. I've got to do it unapologetically. And I have to figure out what the hell you guys did to me. And once you do, it hurts like hell, but it also brings you to a place where you say, I'm at a new horizon. I'm at a watershed moment here. Number one, I'll never go back. Number two, I realize what you did, and I'll never, let that happen to me again. But number three, from this point on, I'm no longer susceptible to your deception. From this point on, I am more responsible than ever for where my life and my thought life goes from here. My joy is now my responsibility, because I'm no longer in your prison. I'm no longer being deceived to that level. We're all self-deceived and deceived by our culture, but I'm not deceived to that extreme level anymore. And I will keep uncovering more ways that I'm deceived by the culture and self-deceived. But in this, I now have full responsibility. I have pulled back the curtain. I'm no longer on a journey to find the Wizard of Oz. Now that that's not even a real thing, now I get to reclaim my life. Now I get to figure out where I go from here. You're responsible for your joy. You're responsible for your peace. You're responsible for your purpose in life. You get to pick it. It's not going to be assigned to you. You get to pick your purpose. You get to pick what makes you feel like this was a good day. This was a meaningful day. I did something that I'm proud of today. You get to decide that, not God, not the church. And that's beautiful to me. That's a beautiful part, because your life is now yours. You are, in a sense, the master of your own soul. You're the captain of your ship. And it's a journey, but this is where we start. This is where we start. Let me read a few comments here, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you for letting me share a few thoughts here. Let's see here. Let's see if we did that one already. Stephen says, well said. Thank you so much. Appreciate your encouragement. Stephen's been a long-term supporter and encourager of the channel, so thank you so much, Stephen, for all of the ways you've encouraged me over the years. Rational Horizon says, and yet Yahweh sends lying spirits and strong delusions. Yeah, very true. Very well said. Definitely disassociated for far too long with the concept that it's no longer I that liveth, but Christ that lives in me. Dead to self. Yeah. You were taught that. It's not your fault. Yeah. My parents were agnostic. I'm so grateful. That's awesome. That's awesome. Wayne says, remarkable explanation of how religion goes bad. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate your encouragement. So needed this today. Stephen says, a good self-diagnosis is an excellent way to understand. Yeah. Yeah. We're looking at the worldview of Christianity, but we're also doing a lot of internal heart work at this. It's a huge part of one's awakening. Once you're able to see a bit more clearly, then you can start to understand. What do you think of Marcionism? Good question. I'm not going to go into Marcionism tonight, but thank you for asking. We'll save that answer for another day. By the way, just as a quick answer, I'll say this. I'm working on a huge project. I've been working on it for years. It's a huge project, and I'm not going to be publishing it until I get the money together to have some peer-reviewed experts be able to tell me if I'm misrepresenting anything. But we will talk about Marcionism and a lot of other topics. We'll get into the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls. We'll get into Enoch. It's all coming, but you got to have money for the experts to be able to proofread and edit that. And that's not going to be anytime soon, unfortunately, but we'll get there. I would recommend, I assume you already know Derek Lambert with Myth Vision. I'm sure he's got some people talking about it, as well as some other related channels. Let's see here. Thank you so much, Stephen. Appreciate your encouragement. Cool beans. And just want to remind everybody, I'm going to be doing several parts to this. The next one is scheduled for, see here, the next one's currently scheduled for Tuesday the 28th. So please do check in. I've got a couple more that week. I was going to do them all that week, but I do have an interesting one on Wednesday the 29th. I'm interviewing someone in New Zealand because it helps, that's the perfect time frame in my evening for their morning the next day. So I had to break it up a little bit, but I'm going to do still 3 or 4 live streams next week. And then I'm going to try to do more live streams than I've ever done before, just trying to eventually get to a point where it's easily 3 or 4 times a week. I think 3 or 4 times a week would be ideal. So get a lot of stuff. And also, last thing I'll say, I am trying to get together some people interested in doing another poetry slam, a deconversion poetry slam. So please do think about it. If you're interested in being part of that, reach out to me. I'm on Facebook. My handle is Harmonic Tim. Please reach out to me. Let me know that when we do the poetry slam, hopefully in a few weeks, that you'd like to do that. If you don't have a poem written yet, get to work, get one written, and or if you want to sing it, whatever you want to do, if you're musical, and would love to have you on the deconversion poetry slam. We did one before. It was great, but I'd love to have twice as many people this time. So think about it. Let me know. Last few comments here. Tara Dawn says, hello, Tim. I've been looking forward to you publishing this for years now. Thank you so much, Tara. I can't wait to get it done. Honestly, there's just so much. It's literally hundreds of pages long already. But I'm very convicted that things should not be put out there unless we're sure of it. Like I think we all got kind of burnt with the with the whole what is it called, the astrotheology stuff. I very much believe in astrotheology, but that one, gosh, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but you know which one, where there was all kinds of allusions saying, Jesus and Osiris were the same. And it's like, there's some real big similarities, but the ones that they told us in that movie, Zeitgeist, they told us some stuff in Zeitgeist that was, bullshit. And so it's like, you can't publish stuff unless you're sure that you've got it right. And I want to be careful about that. So there's sort of an academic, integrity that needs to come into play with stuff like that. So, but anyway, I'm hoping to do it before long. Tony, thank you so much. Appreciate your support. Thank you all again for being here. We'll do it for an hour and a half, again, a couple more times next week. And appreciate your being part of my community and my life. Please be encouraged. I know some of you are going through the ringer, some of you go through hard stuff, me as well. But let's be a community to each other. Let's try to help and support each other. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for being brave. And if anyone does want to share their story in an interview, feel free to reach out, and we'll keep the conversation going. And I hope that this is an encouragement and help to you. For those of you that feel like you're just in the throes of it, again, it does get better. A lot of this is going to be finding the words, the verbiage, and as you do, and you find the bravery to speak up, and the artistic stuff where you just become so poetic in this, it just eventually you don't realize it's happening, but you look back, it's like, holy smokes, I'm really healing. I've come such a distance from where I was at the beginning. You'll get there. Give yourself the patience, and let us be part of the journey if we can. We love to encourage each other. So thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening. Talk to you soon. Good night.